Welcome to today's podcast on charting a pathway to success. In today's podcast, I'm going to really take a look at reflecting on some videos that I recently watched by Linda Darling Hammond, who is a researcher and educator, and she really taps a lot into the globalization of education. So the first thing we're going to look at, the reality. The reality of our education system is that the United States used to be on top, and now we are not. We are in the 25th. We rank 25 or 34, if not more, out of the top 40 countries in educational reform. And that's because we're doing things the old way. We're functioning out of the past systems instead of looking towards the future, as Linda Darling Hammond stated. Our country is stagnant, and we know that with stagnation comes death. Our students are dying academically. Thus, we are putting them in a pipeline to prison, as she stated. What are we doing wrong? That's going to be our second part. We're going to look at what are we doing wrong compared to what the other countries who are thriving are doing right. So, the first part, we are doing too much, too little. We are doing a lot of standards and a lot of different skills-based learning that we do for a couple of weeks, and then we move on and don't hit it again to the next year and make it harder. Whereas countries who are thriving in educational reform take one skill and focus on it hard and deep for a good quarter, which is equivalent to 2 months. And then they go on to the next skill after they know for a fact that their kids not only have learned it, but they have been able to implement it and make it real in everyday application. Thus, it's something that sticks and it makes sense for them. The next part, we are over testing our kids. We give them multiple choice tests. We take tests at a minimum of 4 times a year, and that's for the big test. That's not even for the weekly test or daily quizzes that teachers throw at the kids. Multiple choice questions that have no application. Whereas other countries are giving their students problem-based learning and exploration, things that are applicable and open-ended, so that they can really test the kids' knowledge and application, not just rote memorization. Our system is, as I stated earlier, focused on the past. Linda Hammond Darling states that when we look at our system, we're doing it the old way. And because we are doing it the old way, kids in a row, memorizing information, factory style learning, we're pipelining our kids because they are coming out of school, if they make it all the way through, and they're ended up in jail because they're illiterate, they can't read, they can't think, they can't problem solve. There's no one there to hold their hand through life like there was to hold their hand through the learning process in the schools. And that's what's setting our kids up for a fail. There is no equity in our educational system, and our teachers are undertaught and underqualified. Whereas in countries that are thriving, there is project and problem-based learning. The students have a great deal of language acquisition, and they go deeper and they go slower. So when she was in her video with Dan Rathers, talking about the educational system in Finland, she really dove into the fact that in this country, the students are really, really taking their learning and making it applicable to life. They're creating their own newspapers. They are building businesses and putting them into action. They're doing real life things that have a strong purpose and a plan. And as a result, the kids' learning is sticking and they're thriving. Their learning is basically multisensory and it has a strong core foundation. As a result, the kids are thriving. So that's all wonderful and great for them. But what does that mean for us? When we look at the teachers in these other countries, their teachers are receiving graduate level education. They're getting paid like engineers, and they are being mentored and trained by some of the best of the best of the best. Whereas a lot of our teachers who have mentors are being mentored by people who are just getting paid to do it, people who suck at education, people who halfway succeed, and we're expecting them to help our newcomers want to become teachers and stay that way. It doesn't really work out too well. So that's all well and good when we look at what makes them great and what makes us suck. But now the follow-up is, what in the world are we going to do about it, right? I'm a strong proponent of, don't just give me the problem, give me a solution. What are our next steps? So our next steps. It makes me think about the author and researcher and implementer, Michael Fullan. And in a recent conference that I went to of his, he really talked about this, the globalization of education, ironically. And he talked about how he is getting school districts and schools, like if your whole district isn't on board, bring your school and become a part of a collaborative of 6 other schools that are like yours, that have a similar demographic and size and need, and start creating this system. Project-based learning, language acquisition. Some things you can't do outside of the boundaries of your district. You have to follow the leadership from the top down with the superintendent and the visions and whatnot. But within your power, start to implement these things that have worked into your schools, into your districts. Some people just go off and create their own charter schools. But we can work this with what we have if we really, really put forth the effort. It takes changing the way people think. It takes keeping what's working and changing what's not. And there's a lot that's not working, but there are some things that we do well. So we have to look at what is within our power to change. On a state level reform, one of the things I found really interesting was that Linda Darling Hammond stated, education in the United States is state-based. And a lot of these countries that are killing it in education are the size of some of our states. Like Finland, which is number 1, is the size of Minnesota. So when we're looking at those things, it's so enlightening to realize that if they're doing it, there's nothing that we can't do other than remove our excuses and start coming up with an action plan. So our action plan, for me as an administrator, would be looking at the systems that I can put in place in my school and in my building with my teachers. What training can I provide to them? What systems can I provide for my students? What programs can I provide for my students that will start enriching their learning, making them problem-based learners who can think and problem solve and not just memorize rote things? Because I don't want to have a school of pipeline to prison children. I want to have a school of scholars who are able to compete globally against anyone within our state, within our country, and within other countries. So, looking at how we can chart a pathway to success, looking at how other people are thriving.